Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. I'm joined on today's program by financial author Steve Repak. Steve is an Army veteran who became a certified financial planner and teaches how to apply biblical principles to money management and everyday financial decisions. We'll also discuss how to be a good steward or stewardess of your finances for your heirs and charities. Let's roll. Welcome back. So I'm very pleased to join on the program today Steve Repak. Steve, welcome to the program.
David, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Very glad to have you. Steve is a certified financial planner joining us from North Carolina all the way down here to Daytona Beach, our studios. So I want to give a little background for the audience. Your story is, I would say, at least uncommon, if not unique, that you spent 12 years in the military, and then you became a certified financial planner and started helping people with their money. But there's a part of your story that I think gives you some incredible perspective and gives you insight into how sometimes people struggle with money. So if you can speak to that for a minute, I think that'll give people some perspective of where you're going to be coming from with our conversation today.
Yeah, you know, I come from very humble beginnings, grew up in Lyons, Georgia, grew up poor. I never remember going hungry. We always had shelter over our heads, but, you know, kids made fun of the clothes that I wore. And so I joined the military right out of high school, and it was the first time that I saw real money, and I was like, I can't believe that I'm making so much money. And what was so cool about the military is everything was paid for. My housing, my clothing, my food, everything was paid for, but I still would spend more money than what I made. And I basically left the military after 12 years of service with $32,000 of credit card debt. And basically, I had an opportunity, turned into a certified financial planner. So here I was, fresh out of the Army with a ton of debt, messed up credit, no money in my retirement, and my job was to help people with their finances.
Okay, I think most people would agree that's a pretty unusual set of background, but I think it's a wonderful, dare I say, glorious perspective you have, because it enables you to see people for where they are and maybe meet them where they are and talk with them. And you've done a lot of teaching. You've written a couple of books, Dollars in Uncommon Sense, and then the latest book, the 6-Week Money Challenge, which is written with a biblical perspective. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's one of those things I didn't plan to do. After my first book was very successful, but what was kind of weird was that I had ministry people reaching out to me. I was on the 700 Club, and I'm like thinking, okay, this book wasn't a Christian financial planning book, but it was just kind of one of those things that I felt God just moved me in direction to write a Christian perspective of financial planning. And so I came up with this 6-week money challenge, something almost like basic training for your money. It's kind of like that basic training thing where we have 6 weeks of step-by-step on things to do, but more of a biblical, you know, a theme of the book. So a little bit different.
So it's easy to say in the financial world, it's kind of like diets. There's always seems like there's a new diet that's going to make us perfectly healthy. We're going to be at the optimal weight. All of our medical numbers are going to be perfect. There's always these fad diets. What I think I like about what you've done, Steve, is this is not a fad diet plan for your finances. You're going to the Bible. Yeah. You're going to a biblical perspective that serves as a foundation for the principles that you talk about in your book. I think that's very compelling, and it's not just for believers or specifically for Christians that it's written for. This has broad application for other people, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Jewish, if you're atheist, the principles are the base. I mean, so it's, if you say, well, Steve, gosh, I'm not a Christian, this book has nothing, won't apply to me. The principles are there. Like I said, there's no like some secret out there that we don't know. We just have to be able to get people to get from point A to point B. And how can I motivate you by sharing my story and give you the encouragement and the tools that you need to be necessary to meet your financial objectives?
Okay, very good. Well, speaking to the Bible, the word money is mentioned, what, over 2,000 times? Why do you think that is?
You know, I think that God knows that that's one of the things that kind of keep us away from him. It just basically tears at us. It causes a lot of issues where we kind of put our trust into money instead of putting trust into him. And I think that's the biggest reason where money is just mentioned so much, because he just understands that's one of the things that kind of separates for us from him.
And money, of course, has changed in terms of its form and how we use it over thousands of years, and there will reach a point probably when we don't even have paper money at all. It'll be, some sort of credit we have, these credits. So it's not speaking necessarily to paper money or gold coins. It's to what money represents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you look at that then, and now we take that aspect and drop it into the American culture. I think it would be fair to say that we have a culture that is very focused on things, buying things, materialism. So how do we as Americans living in that culture grab a hold of something that is, more anchored with the biblical perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's why I like the biblical perspective, because, God doesn't care about the car that you drive, doesn't care about the clothes you're wearing, the house that you're living in. He's more concerned with, are you loving, are you giving? He cares more about your character, right? And so we take a look at culture. The culture is totally opposite. The culture is saying that unless you have the fancy clothes, the fancy car, the big house, you're never going to be happy. But we know that's a lie, because, we can turn on television or open up the newspaper and there's some musician or some actor or actress or sports star committing suicide or have drug problems, and they have all the money in the world. So I think that kind of separates us to say that God, money is not going to buy me happiness. Money just affords me opportunities or choices. So the more money I have, the more choices I have, not more happiness.
So you talk about this in your book. You talk about the world status and how that affects us. So you talk about godly substance versus world status. So it's our status in the world that gets in the way?
Yes.
Or how we perceive or chase that perception?
I think that if we were more concerned with godly status than worldly substance, our financial problems will go away, because that's what causes us to get into credit card debt, and it gets us to make very bad financial decisions, because we're always worrying about keeping up with the Joneses. So this next, if I get this new Mercedes, man, that's just going to make my life so much happier, and I've made it in the world. And the thing is that most people care, if you have bad character, if you're a liar and a cheat, people don't like you. It doesn't matter if you're driving a Mercedes or whatever, but if you have strong character, if you're someone that helps others, that cares about others, that wants to help others, I think that speaks more of you than the clothes that are on your back or the car that you're driving.
I think that's the vehicle that they see and that they appreciate. You talk about relative, part of what we do, I think, is we base our evaluation of how well we're doing or how happy we should be based on looking at how we're doing versus other people. And unless you're, the richest guy on the planet, somebody's got more money.
Yeah. That's a great point that you made, is that one of my largest wealth builders that I've worked with in the past has over $14 million worth of assets. And you would think that he's the happiest person in the whole world. He's one of the most miserable people in the whole world. And you say, well, Steve, whenever I talk to audiences, they're saying, Steve, how can he be miserable? Well, the person's always worrying about losing his money. So he doesn't get to enjoy it. So it's like I said, you can have a ton of money, but if you have your priorities in the wrong area, money is not going to make you happy. Now, if you have your money orders in the right way, you say, well, gosh, your money is a tool. I'm a steward of it. I'm going to use it for good and to do certain things. Your life is going to be a lot more joyful.
Well, let's speak to that. How can people be a good steward? So what are some of the most basic things to look at to be a good steward if they have been fortunate to have accumulated? And I say fortunate that success has come to them, not just out of happenstance, out of hard work and determination and dedication and focused effort. They've accumulated. How can they be good steward or stewardesses with that money?
Yeah, and but the thing is like with a steward, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It's just the way that you look at money. When a steward looks at money this way, is that I am not an owner. I'm a manager. So I understand that when I die, my money is going to go to somewhere else. I mean, that's the difference. So it's not, you talk about a Christian perspective. It's not, is that, oh my gosh, I have to think this some weird outlandish ways. No, is that a person that's a steward, they understand that I am managing the assets, little or much, that it's going to eventually go to somewhere else. And the people that are good stewards, those are the people that they understand this, is that it's not the stuff that I have, but it's how much I give. How much do I give of my time? How much do I give of my financial resources? Because the people that are most joyous in their lives, they're not the ones that have the most, they're the ones that either give and serve the most.
John Ortberg says when we die, all the pieces go back in the box.
Yeah.
Kind of like a board game. And I think that gives us some perspective when we think about being a good steward, but also how we arrange our financial affairs. Let's talk about estate planning, for example. Some basic things that we should have in place so that other people are left with maybe our final instructions and what we wanted, not a mess. What are some of those documents you think we should have?
Yeah, and it doesn't, Christian or non-Christian, you're going to die, and so when you die, your stuff is going to go to somewhere else. So you have to have the basic documents. I mean, you need your wills, you need your power of attorneys, like your healthcare power of attorney. You need your living will. You need a durable power of attorney. So these are basically your four basic estate documents that you need. And it's like, it's not like you need them. All you're doing is you care about the people that you're leaving behind to make their lives easier. Because the thing comes, when you think of it, is that when somebody dies, it's in a very emotional, it's very raw, and people make bad decisions because of emotions. So what you're going to do is you're going to have stuff in black and white where, hey, this is what I want to happen when I die, and it kind of alleviates some of the issues and some of the financial luggage that's going on through your death.
And let the people that are going to be affected by those plans know what's coming too. Give them a little bit of a heads up.
Exactly.
Because if they don't know, then it might create challenges. How about in the area of insurance? I know one of the ones that I often talk about, I don't tell people they have to do it, but I tell them we have to talk about it, long-term care. Long-term care insurance. There's lots of different ways to deal with it. This is something, though, that isn't just for the person. It's about making sure other people have the resources to take care of them or can get the help that they need to take care of the person. Yeah.
And that's a great analogy, is that when we talk about accumulating wealth or things like that, people say, well, gosh, you're talking about the Christian perspective. You're supposed to be giving your money away. It's not, you want to be a good manager of it. And the thing is that you don't want to create burdens for others. And at the end of the day is that the money is not going to buy you happiness, but it gives you a choice of doing what you love to do. And if you want to serve, you say, well, Steve, I've worked my whole life. I want to sit there and give back by volunteering, by helping others. And so when you have stuff like, well, Steve, well, do I need long-term care insurance? Well, gosh, think of this, is that the people that you're leaving behind, someone's going to have to pay for that. So do you want to create a burden for them? Because if you're creating a burden for them, are they going to be able to use their assets to sit there and minister to others or to do whatever?
So many people I talk to say, I don't want to be a burden. I want to make sure this is put together. I want to have a plan. I don't want to have to worry about it. But then at the same time, there's sometimes a reluctance to then embrace the solutions that they really know that they need to do. And there's a little bit of, maybe procrastination. Yeah. And the risk of that is that then they end up not being able to do it.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to this, is that if you say something's important to you, I'm going to ask you two questions. Where you spend your time, where you're spending your money. Yeah. So if you say, Steve, my family's important, how much money are you spending, how much time? It doesn't matter, but if you say, hey, I don't want to create a financial burden, don't tell me about it.
Do it.
Do it.
Yeah, I like that. Well, so you've seen these things unfold for many years. Any particular stories that come to mind where maybe you've seen people be successful with this or maybe not so successful with it, with the stewardship and arranging things and making sure things are taken care of?
Yeah, pretty recently, there's a couple, a husband and a wife, that didn't plan properly. What happened was the husband has early onset dementia, and so he has Alzheimer's. And here he is, 50 years old. He got let go from the bank, and they didn't have their plans in place. And it's like you learn about this stuff after the fact. Mm-hmm. And when it's after the fact, there's not too much planning that you can do. And
right.
And like I said, we always think, well, oh, that's just going to happen to somebody else. It's never going to happen to me. It's always going to happen to you.
I'll plan my future tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you speak to Alzheimer's, it's a very serious subject. The average life expectancy after diagnosis, 8 to 10 years. Yeah. So this is something that is not only can be long, can be expensive, and can be a real challenge. So now you talked also about having a plan for how you're going to spend your time, how you're going to spend your money. One of the things that I talk a lot about with people when it comes to estate planning, and I'd love to get your perspective, is I tell them how they give money is as important, if not more important, than how much they give. Yeah. What do you think of that?
Yeah. If I use the biblical perspective, I can tell you this: God doesn't need your money. Okay. So if I use the non-biblical, I'm just using the worldly view of money. Is that the people that are most joyous aren't the ones that have the most; they're the ones that give the most. I'm just telling you, they're just so happy giving back. Like I said, it's not always financially. So you might not be in a position where I can give financially, but you do have time. And so the people that are, we've all heard, it's better to give than to receive. I mean, it's true. And I always tell people to try it out. If it's donating to a foundation or a charity or to your church or whatever, I'm just asking you to try it. And like I said, it's more important how you give, not how much you give. And you say, what do you mean? Like, how do you give? I want to give anonymously. I want to give cheerfully. I want to give willingly. Because if somebody's saying that, oh, you got to write a check at church, I mean, you're going to be pretty upset about it. But if you're saying that, gosh, I'm doing it out of my heart, it's going to make you feel good, and knowing that you're helping others, that's what true joy is.
I think, too, for a lot of people that maybe they can't give a lot during their lifetime because they have certain obligations, or they're concerned about being a good steward and making sure that they're going to have enough money for long-term care or whatever it is, but maybe they can arrange their estate plans so that if something happens, when we're all going to die, when they die, that money then maybe is held in trust, or it goes to help people that could benefit, or organizations. And when I've done that work with people, it's really remarkable, the kind of the change, or how much value they get from that in terms of their experience. Yeah. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, and then they don't think of that. I mean, they have to sit down with someone like you, like a certified financial planner that gives them the option. Because like I said, we think, well, gosh, we just have barely enough for retirement. I really don't have enough to give to someone else other than my family. And then sit down with you and say, well, gosh, have you considered this? Have you put this plan together? But right. You don't know it. You don't know what you don't know. And so sit down with a CFP, and hopefully they can maybe shed a little bit of light on the subject.
Well put. Steve and I are both certified financial planners, so we're very, very familiar with how people are dealing with this, because this is things we've dealt with people in practical situations. And, it's funny, we talked about the rush that sometimes people get when we talk about spending versus savings, and the excitement and the physical impact that has on our brains, the endorphins. I think for a lot of people, too, the giving can have the same impact.
It does, and I see it every day. You see the people that are the happiest and the most joyous, like it says, they're the ones that are giving the most, serving the most, volunteering the most, because at the end of the day, on your deathbed, you're not going to be thinking about, gosh, I should have done this, or I don't care how much money I accumulate. It's like, what type of impact did I do for someone else? I mean, that's what you can be thinking about.
I doubt anybody says, if they're lying there in this deathbed, that, gosh, I just wish I had worked a little more.
Yeah.
I should have worked harder. I think people reflect on, and the people I've talked to as they've gotten older and closer to that time, they're reflecting a lot on the people they've impacted in their lives, both with their time and also financially. And I think, just to put a final bow on it, Steve, that we're not talking about how much money. It's how you do it, and just being smart, but being responsible. And again, I applaud you for your 6-week money challenge, because you're giving people great perspective.
I appreciate it. Like I said, it's not how much, it's just give. I mean, yeah. Just give. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. Well, we've given to them, and you've given of your time, and I thank you for that, Steve.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for the scoop. Today's scoop is the 7 deadly sins of retirement planning. As a way of measuring my own progress and also evaluating how well I plan for things that could affect my clients, I like to go back and look at old presentations I've made. I recently ran across a DVD we had put together back in 2008. Now, if you recall, that was the year that the stock market dropped almost 40% and then reached its bottom in the March of 2009, when the stock market fell all the way down to 6,500 points on the Dow. Anyhow, Here are the 7 deadly sins. They are just as relevant today as they were back then. I'll give you the list, then talk about each one. Here we go. Number 1, uncoordinated, disjointed investments with no overall plan for income. Sin number 2, failure to get the appropriate mix of growth, income, principal protection, and liquidity for your situation. Number 3, not getting advice from a qualified planner. Number 4, failure to plan for loss of income due to the death of a spouse. Number 5, failure to plan for longer life expectancy and inflation. Number 6, drawing income from money in the stock market. And number 7, paying too much in investment fees. So those are the big 7 sins that I've seen create problems for people. And I want to dig into each one of them. Okay, now, some of those are a little harsh. You know, perhaps I wasn't as polished back then in 2008. The message, though, is still very important. And it is consistent with my primary message to you, which is you need to be informed. You need to get the best advice you can, but still look out for yourself. Okay, let's dig into the list. Number 1, uncoordinated, disjointed investments with no overall plan for income. So it's for a financial plan to work well, or for your investments to work well, or for your financial outcomes to be good, my opinion is that your financial plan needs to be coordinated. Think of it like musical instruments. You know, have you ever heard a musical group warming up? Sometimes they're all making all these different noises at the same time with their instruments. That's noisy and doesn't sound very good. But then once the conductor comes in, everybody's ready, they come to attention, and then they make a symphony. That's what you need your financial investments and products to do. There has to be coordination to get things to work in the proper way. A lot of times we hear conversations or discussions about diversification. You don't want to have all your investments in one category. Things need to be coordinated. You wouldn't want to have 15 violins in your symphony. I mean, it would be a wonderful performance. It would probably be fantastic, but it's not the same as having all the different instruments and each of the performers doing their part. So you need a coordinated plan. Number 2, failure to get the appropriate mix of growth, income, principal protection, and liquidity for your situation. We need an all-season program. We need something that's going to work regardless of what may come. A lot of financial planning is about preparing for what we don't know may happen down the road. So we've got to be prepared. We need liquidity. We need some of our money safe. We need some of our money that's going to give us income, and we need money that's going to still have the potential to grow even when you're in retirement to help fight inflation and accumulate for the future. Number 3, not getting advice from a qualified planner. I don't want this to sound like self-promotion, because it's not, but I've seen for over 2 decades people get financial advice, some of it good, some of it not. There are people that either don't know what they're doing or know exactly what they're doing and putting their interest ahead of yours, the investor, the client. So you've got to be very careful. You need to be discerning. You need to evaluate and be cautious when you're going to work with a financial person. Number 4, failure to plan for loss of income due to the death of a spouse. 80% of women die single, either from being a widow or divorced or never having gotten married. This is especially an important topic or area of concern for women, but also for men. So you need to look at how the finances would change for the survivor and take steps while you're both here to prepare and have things arranged properly. You might need to dedicate an account to specifically serve that purpose. Number 5, failure to plan for longer life expectancy and inflation. I mentioned before, keeping some of your money working for longer term growth. The stock market, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to deal with inflation. Number 6, drawing income from money in the stock market. Dangerous. Don't want to have to pull money out when the market's down. It's better to draw money from safe investments. do that, and it'll work, I think, a lot better in the long term. And number 7, paying too much in investment fees. The higher your fees, the more comes out of your account and doesn't allow your money to work for your benefit. So be careful, pay attention to the sins. It's been said that, we all make mistakes, we all sin, but if we pay attention to the mistakes or the challenges, I think we can do much better. And you know what I'm going to say? You'll plan stronger.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.